runway into a conversation, and then we'll open it up and have some conversations with you, and we'll go from there. So this book, The Allure of Elsewhere, is about taking a solo camping trip from Minnesota to Nova Scotia in 2014, and doing some research into my dad's family, who was among the first French Acadians to Nova Scotia in the 1620s. If you know the history of the Cajuns in Louisiana, they used to be the Acadians in Nova Scotia. The word deteriorated into Cajun. We were both deported and not deported in 1755 when the British decided that was what they were going to do. We were not deported because we were in prison, which is also, British doings. So I wanted to know how this side of my family really came to tell the stories that it did, and chose not to tell the stories that it chose not to. And doing some research into that history, it became very clear very early on that there were really good reasons why this family didn't tell stories, because they hurt. And it really did start, I was 17, I remember walking into my dad's office with this very crudely drawn family tree and wondered why his grandmother and his uncle had the same death date. And I thought maybe a car accident. And it turned out to be murder, which was not where I expected that to go. Doing a little bit more digging, my grandfather's father, my great-grandfather, was drafted for World War I. He was Canadian, but in the States at the time, so he got drafted by the Americans. He was drafted in the 4th draft for World War II, and a few weeks before he was scheduled to report, he took his own life. So that sort of sent my historical brain feelers okay, so did he see combat in World War I? And come to realize that the National Archives that has all those records burned in the 70s, and so only 5% of World War I records still exist. And so this idea of silences, and where are silences protective, and where are they not a failure, became sort of the engine for this book. But I am solo, have been solo intentionally my life, and when I was 30 I bought a camper. And so I have cats, and they went with me, much against their will. Galway was 11 at the time. His idea of roughing it was a Super 8. Maeve was a Siamese and yelped at everything. So they were very interesting companions. So I went up through Canada, and so through Prince Edward Island into Nova Scotia. So I'm just going to read a little bit of Prince Edward Island, because it's got some good cat stuff in it. So, I leave Fundy National Park in its unreasonable infestation of black flies under clear skies, and brave the grade down to Alma where the tide is out. I don't get lost on my way to Moncton, which is unexpected, but when I get there, the mood inside the Atlantic Superstore, where I stop to buy more silverware, is silent in a way that I don't understand. I go looking for tortillas, which cannot be had for love or money, and I pick up canned goods that will keep me through my 3 days on Prince Edward Island, because they'll be easier to keep than frozen vegetables. I grab some jarred curry sauce, making sure that it's vegetarian because it's often not, and flash back to the hamburger helper of my childhood camping. The food I'd had in the camper up to this point has been mostly cooked over the campfire, but the weather forecast on PEI is going to be too stormy for fires, so I need to reconsider scamp food, but I will actually start cooking. It won't be anything fancy, but the first step is using my little crock pot. It will be several more years before I add a thrifted rice cooker to my scamping appliances, so I'll have to rely on packaged instant rice. When I get to the checkout with my cart, the look on the cashier's face is the mask of someone holding it together so tightly that when release comes, it will shatter something inside of her. It was his brother who was shot, she tells me, nodding to the tall man who's just exited the lane. That's awful, I say. I don't need to know what she's talking about to find the situation terrible. I walk back across the parking lot to where I park the Jeep and the scamp, stow the food in the camper, pull back onto the road, not sure what I just walked through, and as I'm attempting to get onto Route 15 to Route 2, the roads are nearly empty in the direction I'm going and nobody in the oncoming lanes. It's incredibly eerie, but I have no frame of reference. In hindsight, it was wrong enough that I should have turned on the radio, but that didn't occur to me at the time. Maybe I just wondered if it was another sinkhole, another detour like Ontario. It felt different though, and in hindsight, I wonder why I didn't listen to my gut. Police cruisers with flashing lights block the road in front of me, so I say a prayer of gratitude for the Jeep and Scamp's turning radius, turn around, and head back towards Moncton. This is the fastest and easiest way to get to Prince Edward Island, so I'll need to find an alternate path. Without conscious thought, what I'm doing is ignoring that history is literally happening right in front of me, intersecting with the road I'm on. The gas station is empty when I pull in. You look lost, says the attendant. Not yet, I say, but I'm getting there. I say, they've shut down the road, and I need another way to get to PEI. Haven't you heard, he says? Most of the city's shut down. And then he tells me about cops getting shot, and I say, I'm not from here. I don't know. He asks where I'm from in the voice of someone who expects that I would have had to been on Mars not to know what's going on. Later, I would imagine people camping on 9/11, coming back into a world that had changed utterly while they were unaware. I remember the unnatural silence of that day, the skies absent of planes over my apartment in Spokane, even road noise nearly eliminated as we processed what was happening. I say, I've been in Fundy National Park for the last couple of days, and he nods as if this is acceptable ignorance. He pulls a newspaper off a shelf and hands it to me, where I read that a heavily armed 24-year-old Justin Burke had just gone on a shooting spree that had left 3 Mounties dead and 2 injured. The city shut down transit, businesses, and schools closed, and Moncton turned into a ghost town while they searched for him, and it was this ghost town that I stumbled into on the way somewhere else. 28 hours of citywide terror from Moncton until Burke gave himself up, but we don't know that now. Right now, we're fighting against fear. The gas station looks at me and says, my advice, get out of town. There's no snark in his voice. He's worried. Trying, I say, more flippantly than I should have. He gives me directions for an alternate route, and I pull back on the road. The ease with which I leave Moncton and its terror behind unsettles me a little because I do have the privilege to simply drive away. A couple of hours later, I overestimate the impact of driving across the Confederation Bridge to Prince Edward Island, and it isn't nearly as exciting as I want it to be. Part of the problem with driving bridges of any magnitude while being a solo person is that you need to pay attention to the road, instead of looking at the scenery. Rain starts when I leave Moncton, but it's cleared by the time I get to PEI, and the clarity of sky and water around the Confederation Bridge is like driving into eternity, and it is not interesting. Prince Edward Island is a different kind of allure of elsewhere, and there's always a moment when you're standing in a place that you've only seen in movies or know from books, a world that is not real, and you think, wow, it really does exist. I remember that reaction outside Radio City Music Hall in front of the Declaration of Independence and the Golden Gate Bridge. Maybe that's enough of a reason to be here, because I'm curious, and the place is beautiful and wonderful, and I want to be here. Cabot Beach Provincial Park may be one of the few missteps in my nearly blind trust of Canadian provincial parks. It's mostly open without many trees, and everything is old and worn. It's out of the way on the north side of the island, so I hope I haven't made a giant mistake given the impending storm. When I pull up to the gatehouse to register, I tell the woman inside that I want 3 nights, water and electric. She looks at me dumbfounded. Have you seen the weather? I have. Nothing to be done about it. She tells me to pick whatever site I want. I nod and pull through. I choose site 9 and start to set up, making sure that the Scamp is level, putting the chocks around the tires to keep it in place, cranking up the jack to take the camper off the Jeep hitch, and then I discover, to my horror, that it's on enough of an incline, and the grass is wet and slippery enough that the Scamp, even with the chocks, slides gently down the incline into the back of the Jeep. I think I startled the local wildlife with my colorful language. Maeve gives me an 8 out of 10. Thankfully, there's no damage to either, and once I recover from the horror of it, of trying to stop the slide of the Scamp with my body, which admittedly is not my finest problem-solving hour, I'm grateful that the campground is empty enough of people that my humiliation will go unnoticed. I managed to reset the chocks, move the Jeep forward, and watch it slide down a second time. Maeve gives me a 9 out of 10. There will not be a third time, so I hook it back up and head for the flat sites I should have picked the first time around. Later that night, I realized that most people will never understand why I camp alone. They might eventually understand what compels me to travel, but they'll never understand what compels me to travel alone. They'll never understand what it's like to travel with everything in the world that I need hooked to my hitch, or the absolute joy that comes with stretching out in my zero-gravity chair with a book in the middle of the afternoon next to a piece of scenery that I've never seen before, or in a place that I know so well that has become part of my own mythology. They'll never understand why I'm so happy standing in the quiet of my camper in the brisk of morning, deciding what kind of tea I want to greet the day, and sitting on the picnic table and doing nothing except drinking my tea and breathing. It's pure, absolute freedom, but it's more complex than that. It's not a freedom from, it's a freedom to, a freedom forward, to do everything I want to, because I want to, and because I can. Moments like this, I'm ridiculously glad to be camping alone, even as evening descends onto the North Shore of Prince Edward Island. I get ready for bed, all warm and comfortable as I snuggle down into the electric blanket with the cats. I hear the wind start to pick up, and the rain patters against the fiberglass in ever-increasing patterns, and then I realize with a jolt that in all the excitement of setting up the camper that I forgot to put down the stabilizer jacks. There's a gale coming. I've seen the weather. Not putting down the jacks is not an option. So I mutter about useless cats not pulling their weight, camping alone, put my clothes and rain boots back on and just do it. Because trying to sleep without the jacks down, with the storm coming, conditions are going to get worse. So I do it, to the amusement of crows who perch in the tree next to the scamp and the cats whose faces out the window speak of deep disappointment in humanity. Thank you.
Well, since you just read it, I might as well ask you about the title.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? And does the allure of elsewhere imply that here is never good enough?
That was largely where it started, because I grew up in Minnesota. I grew up in northern Minnesota, and everything that was important happened somewhere else. You know, the book starts with camping out to see the California family, and they live north of San Francisco. You know, we saw that on Full House every Friday, and you could see stories in New York or Los Angeles or someplace else, but you were never going to find Minnesota. And if they told stories of Minnesota, it was always, the butt of a joke. Whether it's Ole and Lena jokes or, somebody making fun of us rightly for Gary Anderson missing the field goal in 1999. But there's not a whole lot when I was growing up to take seriously about Minnesota. And so anything, when you grew up, you went somewhere else. And so there was always this push to go somewhere else, even as what I felt was really important was right beneath my feet. And so it's kind of a push and pull, fighting that, while also sort of embracing it.
And if you'd been 15 years older and the Mary Tyler Moore Show had been on TV, maybe none of this would have happened.
Maybe.
Just a side note, I was recently in Nova Scotia. That shore looks a lot like the North Shore, right?
Yeah, it does.
It's kind of crazy.
It's all still Canadian Shield, like it's all the same geology.
Okay.
Yeah. Like if you look at the the Canadian Shield goes straight through like Quebec into Prince Edward Island into the Maritimes. It's all the same.
Talk to me a little bit. I know this is something you grapple with in the book, and also I think that you teach about the concept of whose story is it to be told. I'm guessing that's a major concern if you're writing any memoir, but especially if you're writing a memoir that involves other people.
It's the first memoir I've done, because I'm really interested in ideas, and so primarily I consider myself an essayist. But this book, I struggled a lot with the ethics of storytelling, simply because there was so much in the history that hurt, and it didn't hurt me, but it's hurt to people I cared about, and so I said from the beginning I wouldn't write it till my grandparents were gone, and so I didn't. And so even then, my family gets complete veto power over whatever's in a book, and so I don't want to even accidentally push on something that hurts if I don't know it, and so we're tightly knit enough that that's important to me. But I definitely am not one of the writers who's like, oh, it's my story, I can write it, who cares what the fallout is. Family's too important to me for that.
Yeah, it seems like that has to be, I guess I've talked with a couple of people who've written memoirs lately, and it has to be sort of a paramount concern. I mean, it's almost the book behind the book. You talked a little bit about deciding what to write and also deciding what not to write. Like, what part of this book is the not to, like, how much of this book exists as the not to write?
Let's just say that I had to do a lot of writing to get to where it needed to be. And so there were some big feelings about various pieces of this that I knew that would never end up in the final draft. And so I had to write it and then revise and refine it to get to the final product, because I can't skip steps to get to the end. And so there's quite a bit that was left on the cutting room floor.
And I suppose that gets to be useful to you, even if it doesn't end up in the book that you're sharing with other people.
Mm-hmm.
Are you thinking about, as you're writing the book and sharing stories of some of the people
Yeah.
in this room, are you thinking about the people who are ultimately going to read it, or is it more a project for you and then it turns out that you share it with, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I think what my family thinks of what I do is most important, but other than that, I wasn't particularly worried about extended family, except for one person. And so I was definitely working on writing it for a larger audience too. There's no connection to us, no connection to Nova Scotia, because the larger questions of what do we do with a family history, what do we do with a collective identity versus an individual identity, are pieces of that question that are universal as opposed to specific. And so the goal of the book was to write that in a way that somebody who had no connection to any of these pieces, whether it's being solo, being a camper, having cats, having a family that has this history, there's just something to grab onto.
Well, and now you've been on the road a little bit with the book already,
Yeah.
which came out May 20th?
Yeah, 20. Yeah.
Somewhere around there. And so I'm assuming you've met people who potentially read the book and talked to you about it. Have you been surprised by any of the reactions that you've gotten from people? Does it seem to be landing the way you hoped it would?
Yeah, and what's been really great is a number of solo women campers who
Really?
have like, oh, I camp alone too, and that's been the biggest surprise, because I think they've been most surprised. Maybe they didn't know that coming into the book or the event, and like, oh, there's somebody like me, and that's been fun.
I guess it's a little bit of a contradiction in terms to have a community of solo campers. It'd be a little bit difficult for you all to have a convention or something.
Well, I mean,
Or
there's
you could
different
all
ways.
come together and then go alone in your.
You know, there are people. There's a group called Sisters on the Fly, who is it's an organization of solo women campers, but they tend to like camp together, and so I ran into some of them in St. Louis, I think it was, and they said the only rules are no husbands and kids and be kind. I was like, okay. But then one of their husbands like showed up accidentally, is what she said, and she apologized for him all night. And I'm not quite sure why, but it was amusing. So there are women who camp alone, but then camp together, you know. But then there are people like me who are like, I just rather be on the road by myself.
And just to clarify, you don't hate other people.
No, I don't do that. No, I do not. I do not. And I took all three of my nibblings camping this summer, which was great fun. I have a niece and 2 nephews, and yeah, I did some remodeling to the camper after I first got it to make sure that there was a bed for them to sleep in when they got big enough. So
That reminds me, I saw a picture, I think on your Instagram, I have not seen the stamp in person. I saw a picture on your Instagram, and it looks like your bedspread is made of diamonds. What is going on there?
I mean, it was a thrifted bedspread, so I mean, it's
Nice.
I mean, it's. I would say I'm roughing it, not roughing it. So I mean, camp with an electric blanket. So,
Oh.
but that I would say that's the best part. Like, where are the boundaries? Like, I don't do well when I'm cold, and so, you know, electric blanket. My mom refused to go camping without the electric blanket with her kids.
Huh. Well, that's good to know yourself. Did you, speaking of which, did you know from the beginning of these adventures that you definitely wanted to do them by yourself, or was that something that became clear?
I've been intentionally solo since my mid-20s, and so it finally got to a point where I was like, I'm not waiting for permission or somebody else to go with. I can go, and I can go now, and it was a freeing kind of permission to give myself to just live my life looking for.
Yeah.
It's like, we're gonna go. So,
Talk about your relationship to your scamp, which I'm a little startled does not have a name.
I'm also startled it doesn't have a name. Nothing is stuck. It's
Oh,
kind
you've
of
tried?
I've tried.
Like, can you give us some examples of discarded names?
Well, there's a lot of people who name their scamps Scampy, as in like shrimp Scampy.
Yeah.
There's other little ones. I had a dream once, it's in here, that I woke up from a dream and the scamp's name was Haiku. And then like it had like Basho like in letters on the side of it. So it was still just the scamp.
Was it hard to name your cats?
No,
They spoke to you?
kind of. Did they yell at me? Also yes. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
maybe Froome? Is that potential?
Maybe, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
what about the process of writing the book? Did you were talking about what to leave in, what to leave out, kind of figuring out what the book was. Did it turn out to be the book that you thought it was going to be?
No.
How so?
It originally was a collection of essays, and each place I was a chapter, but it became more important that there was a story in between that, and that the spine of the trip needed to be stronger, and so it turned into more scene work, more in the moment sort of work.
And this was the shift from essay to memoir.
Yeah, yeah.
Was that nervous making to have I in the book?
No, because largely my eye is driving even my essays.
Okay.
The biggest shift was, or the hardest shift was staying in the moment. And so a lot of times, I'd have a scene or a story, and then later I would think of this and this and this. And I was working with a friend who was helping me. She's like, no, think about it now. I'm like, okay.
Oh.
So that was the hardest piece of that shift.
This friend is an editor?
She is an editor and a writer. Maria Hornbacher is also a scamper. I got her into it.
And she, your event at the Center for the Book, she was there, right?
Yeah, she was my conversation partner.
Do you solo camp together?
We've only done it once. We went to the Scamp Homecoming Rally this summer for the first time.
Oh, I want to hear about the Scamp Homecoming Rally. Where is it?
That was up in Walker. The factory's in Bacchus.
Oh, sure.
And so it was at the Moon Dance, where Moon Dance is, and so concert grounds.
Oh, right.
And so there were probably maybe 100, 150 scamps parked in this campground, and it was weird to go from being like, my camp, like you're never gonna stumble into somebody else's camper in a campground when you've got a scamp, because it doesn't look like anybody else's, until you're in a campground full of scamps, and you're like, oh, which one is mine again?
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Did you have scamp envy? Like, do people have
Yes and no. There was, one of the things was an open house one of the mornings, and you could just like hop into other people's campers and see what they did, and I didn't, because I was like, I'm just gonna sit here and let people look at all the cool stuff we've done to the camper, because there are really cool stuff we did to the camper.
Yeah, let's hear about some of those.
So Dad and I have been working on it since I got it. So I have a 13-foot camper. It was the original kind of layout, which has the dinette in the back, it's got a kitchen on the side, and then a couch in the front that makes into bunk beds. And I didn't have any use for that, so I took out the fiberglass couch. We built a 2-person dinette. I built it so the litter box would be underneath one of them and the porta potty under the other seat, and made it so that we could make that bed back into a bed for the kids to sleep on when they camped with me. We built shelves in the closet out of PVC, which you can't drill into 1/4-inch fiberglass, and so this sort of like presses up against the closet, and that's been great. I keep the dinette bed down as a bed all the time. I don't put it up into a table, so I built a drawer underneath it so I can have storage underneath there all the time. But then one of the later projects, we cut a hatch in the outside of the scamp to access the storage on the dinette seats from the outside.
Oh,
That was nerve-wracking.
like a drive-in through window kind of a thing?
So So it's just a, you know, an outside sort of hatch. So it locks and I can store all of my cords and dirty things in there and don't lose all that storage space. I'm afraid of propane, weirdly. So we finally took off the propane tanks and put a toolbox on the front. It's always fun to use the impact driver.
So you actually made a tiny kitchen tinier.
No, the kitchen is still the same.
Oh, okay.
Although I did take out the stove and, cause I wasn't using it, so I've got a microwave there now. So it's got a fridge, it's got a microwave, got an induction burner, which works better than the propane anyway. It's got a little sink. I was with, my nephew in Duluth this last weekend. We got like 3 inches of rain. 3 inches of rain with an 8-year-old is an adventure in itself, but he was quite the trooper. One of Mom Column. Yep. But one of the reasons that I like this camp as much as I do is because it was raining. It's still an okay place to be inside. Like it sort of feels bigger on the inside than it looks from the outside. So Sam and I did very well. But we, you know, still would have dinner inside and cook inside, although we prefer to do it outside. So it had to work. Had to work both ways.
One sort of side effect you talk about in the book of solo camping is the hey there little lady, let me give you a hand kind of a helper situation. How often would you say you encounter that?
I would say every 3rd campground,
Really?
maybe every 4. Yeah.
And it irritates you?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think part of the irritation is the difference between do you want me to back it in for you versus do you want some help backing in? Like those are 2 different questions.
Oh, sure.
Because my dad camps by himself, and more likely than not, the question is do you want some help backing in? Nobody asks him, do you want me to back it in for you?
Has anyone ever asked you that?
Nope.
Do they ask you if you want help?
Sometimes.
Oh, okay.
Providing an acceptable,
That'd be good.
ethic
I'm sorry, what
to
was
help somebody back in.
Yeah,
Anybody,
yeah, yeah,
just to, like,
yeah. Do you want a hand? Do you want somebody to back you? Like that's perfectly legit. It's the do you want me to do it for you? Like, oh no.
Yeah.
I can back in things. I'm a little egotistical about how well I can back something in. Oh yeah.
Like speed?
Like in on the first try.
Every time?
Pretty close.
Wow.
Pretty close.
Nice.
Not all the time, but pretty close. Which then I swagger a little when I get.
At the beginning of the season, do you like practice to make sure that you'll be able to do it in one?
That practice comes like coming in out of my driveway because usually the last 2-3 years I had to have work done on it, and so
On
take it
your
out of my.
driveway? On your driveway, you mean?
No, on the camper.
Oh, sorry.
So I'll take it in to get fixed, and then I will like have to back it in like before I get back out. So there's a couple ins and outs before I get on the road.
And it's always in Tennessee, or it's okay. So you drive it here when you come here for the summer.
I do. Yeah.
Any adventures there? Is that like you're going across some pretty
I
tricky
usually
terrain?
I do. Traditionally, it's been Memphis, St. Louis, Iowa, here. So I can usually do it in about 4 days. 5 days is lovely, but usually 4. The most adventurous is there were a couple of tornadoes in St. Louis a couple years ago, which then tossing the cats into their kennels, into the car to drive down to the bathhouse. And that's not my favorite adventure, but we did it. And nobody was hurt, and the campground was okay. But yeah, that kind of safety is a different conversation when you're by yourself.
Yeah, I imagine. What was when you were writing the book? What was the trickiest part to get right?
I'd say some of the childhood sorts of things that I remembered one way, maybe the family remembered a different way.
Did you do that? Was that both? I'm trying to remember.
Or because there's more than one way to tell a story, and all of them can be right. And as a nonfiction writer, I find that much more interesting than this is the way that it happened. Yeah, I like those stories.
I wonder if anyone's ever done an experiment where everybody in a family writes their.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That would be interesting, huh?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to try that sometime.
When you're teaching, what are your students, maybe stumbling over, but what are they most interested in this issue of sort of telling your own story and figuring out whose it is to tell?
Largely, especially at the beginning level, I try to get away from that entirely.
Oh, because you want them to be free.
I want them to learn that you don't have to write about yourself if you don't want to, and you don't have to write about the worst thing that's ever happened to you. Like, you don't need to pry yourself open and bleed on a page for a reader to be interested in what you're doing. And so, at the intro level, I'm teaching odd object essays, I'm teaching travel writing, I'm teaching all kinds of things that get their brains working in other place writing, in other ways. And so by the time they get to more advanced levels, then we can talk about more personal sorts of work, because they know the craft of how to do the other pieces. That there's more to nonfiction than drama, there's more to it than what hurts. Because you're not always trying to solve what hurts, and especially for young writers, that feels necessary.
Yeah, because your book isn't about solving hurt. I mean, it acknowledges that there are things that hurt. But
Yeah, and this one just doesn't come to a very satisfying conclusion. It just, it ends. Like, I wanted to have some, I don't know, reconciliation or kind of closure with my grandfather, and it didn't happen. And that has to be an okay ending to the story too.
yeah, and probably an ending that a lot of people can relate to. Did you always know that it was going to end in that manner? How did that?
Well, it actually ends with my niece. So it doesn't end in that place of, I don't know, friction. It ends with 3 years later, both grandparents are gone. My grandmother in 2015 and my grandfather in 2017. And I hear my grandfather's voice in my father's recollection that he wouldn't go back to visit his parents' or brothers' graves, because if he didn't tell them he loved them in life, it made no sense to say it now. And I've collected their gravestones into my memories from my archival records, because their active creation of a family story has ended. That summer, Cora and I go camping north of Duluth, and we go hunting on the shores of Lake Superior for stones. We're going to make story stones, I say, picking up one, then discarding it for a thinner, smoother specimen, showing her what we're looking for. The stones themselves are largely gray blue granite, porous, and they will soak up the paint she uses to draw. I should have packed acrylic. Cora's oar boat looks like a caterpillar, but we know what it is. She paints waves for water on one stone, a bright sun on another, a cloud on another, then a campfire. She draws the cascades of Gooseberry Falls. I paint the scamp, and it's decently recognizable. Cora hands 2 stones to me and directs me to draw a Split Rock lighthouse with a beacon of lightning from its eye, even though it's only lit once a year on the anniversary of the Edmund Fitzgerald sinking. And I think about direction, illumination, and how all stories are fragments, reconstruction. When we return home, she sets the stones on the coffee table in front of her parents, shifting the fragments of story to tell the tale of who she is and where she's been in whatever way she chooses. So it shifts into, like, her literally shifting the story of what we did, and like leaving that as all stories are fragments, all stories are pieces and can be reconstructed in different ways.
And kind of leaves us with the image of what stories you're going to tell down the road in ways. You know, speaking of which, I hope this isn't just me, but I'm always interested in, so I was here actually for a reading. The Irish writer Niall Williams, he's a novelist, was talking about the way he writes, and the way he writes just made me mental, because he said, I write the first sentence of the book, and it has to be exactly perfect before I can even write the second sentence. Whereas there's also the approach of, like, say, in Minnie Lamott, who says, write, I won't say the word because it's a bad word, kind of like crap.
Yep.
And you just get it on the paper, and then you can go back and fix it. So in that continuum, where are you? How does that work?
I feel like the books are gonna do their work. Like, once I get a first line, then the story or the book basically writes itself.
Oh,
So all the Wild Hungers, that first line, all the first lines of each of those chapters came first, and then those chapters worked.
but you had to labor over that first sentence before.
Yeah, so I could free write and I could do all of the sort of mental like gymnastics of what that chapter was going to be, but until that first line showed up, it was always just going to be notebook
Huh.
stuff. This one was a little bit different in that, like I keep scamp journal. Like so when I'm camping, I keep a journal of whatever it is I do in the day. It is the only time in my life I can actually keep a journal for any length of time. And so,
So like the other 9 months of the year, no journal.
no. So when I'm in it, here for a couple of days, no journal. Kept it when I was, camping with the kids and doing some other roundabouts. I'll keep it when I go back to Chattanooga, but then it'll go back on the shelf until next year when I get the stamp back out. So a lot of that drafting happened, and so I think I've done this work too. So Anne Lamott's first drafts, I've got this idea of 0 drafts being the draft before that, and so there's largely no structure to it. Like there's a stage before a first draft where you're just starting to figure out which ideas start to coincide with other ones. There's a lot of bullet points and there's a lot of arrows, and once that sort of starts to come together, then I can get to a first draft.
So it's like one of those murder boards in a
Yeah,
movie
kinda.
where there's
Yeah,
like
yeah. No, I'm gonna use that terminology now.
It's yours.
Yeah. Yeah.
What about talking about how you wanted to make sure that nobody was heard of the what was in the book. Have you gotten into trouble in that regard in the past, or known of people getting into trouble in that regard in the past?
There was one bit in the last book that I didn't know was a bruise I was pressing on, and so it came out, and like it got caught early enough. It doesn't matter to anything. It was just part of the sentence, and that was over.
Huh. Yeah, because it's got to be hard to be outside yourself, sort of observing and seeing the parents going down a road she should be going down here.
I've tried really hard not to. But I think part of that is like my lens to whatever I'm writing about is usually way up here. And it's very, very rarely close enough to the subject to be, to touch.
Where is your favorite place you've ever visited? In the scamp specifically.
In this camp.
Wait, do you travel non-scamp travel? Do you do that?
I haven't been to Ireland since 2015, but I was doing a lot of travel to Ireland.
Do they have scamps?
They, not that I know of, but I just love to camp. That'd be amazing. So, yeah, outside of the States, Galway, Ireland is my favorite place.
Oh, hence the cat.
Hence the cat. So, the current cat is Dublin.
Oh.
So, Galway and Maeve have gone to the Great Campground in the Sky, and they have been replaced by Dublin and Dara, who are weirdly same personality-wise. He is scared of everything, and she would like to conquer the planet. Which is why neither of them go outside.
But they still go on
Yeah,
trips.
they so go.
In all that journaling, does the scamp ever say, Karen, my name should be...
I will listen harder.
I wish you would.
I will
It's very
listen.
bothersome. Oh, we're getting away.
Wait,
It's
yeah.
time to open up to questions.
Or about around 15 minutes if you,
Delightful.
yeah.
Who has questions for Karen? And please say them loudly so everyone can hear.
What advice would you give to other young women who want to get into solo camping?
Just do it. Don't wait for.
That's been taken.
What?
That's
It's taken this long. I'm a little late to that one. That's true.
Tia.
Like there's no reason not to, and there's ways to get into it that don't violate any comfort levels, or there's ways to do it that still make you feel safe. And whether that's tent camping or car camping or scamping or any other mode, there's so many ways of doing it, and the value of getting outside wouldn't, or wouldn't in that way, is so valuable that, you know, everybody should do it.
Thank you.
I forget if you talked about this in the book. Did you do tent camping prior to camping?
We did pop up when I was a kid.
Oh, okay.
That was the compromise between my parents because mom refused to sleep on the ground.
And there was an electric blanket there.
She did.
Other questions?
So you talked about the solo women's camping group that you sort of found, or
Yeah.
there's been like an audience for the book. Was there, in the, genesis of the book, is there, are you working with an editor and saying, this is what I want to do for my next book, and they say, oh, there's not a market for that, or like, is this solely, this is absolutely the book that is my creative goal, like, is there any kind of, market or editorial kind of, like direction at the creation of the book and trying to find a target for it? How did the
That is a very good question. I've been very lucky to work with a really great editor at Milkweed Editions. So Daniel Slager did my second book, All the Wild Hungers, and he's marvelous in what he does. And that book, which was about cooking for my mom through cancer, was largely, like, it was not really designed to be like a long form narrative. And I was writing these really short chapters that were largely like, here's what I cooked, here's the pan that I cooked it in, because I was very obsessed with my cast iron. All my cast iron is thrifted and named. See, maybe I used up my names, I don't know. But there was one point in that where I was trying to organize it. We're talking about connective tissue between all of these pieces. And I didn't want it to be chronological. I was like, can we try something? And he just looks at me, he's like, can you please try? I was like, so I took it home and I threw it on the living room floor and I organized it chronologically. It's like, of course it works now. Like, it solved all the problems. So I was willing to trust him when we talked like, what's the next book? And I was like, here's the next book. And he's like, okay. And then we worked on, here's how we're gonna shape the large scale bits of it to find like where it's gonna go market wise. And so because it's a literary press, because it can do that, it's more interested in the book itself, and we're gonna find the market later, which is not the truth for every press. And so, even yesterday we just had a like, what's the next book? And I'm like, oh, I have ideas. And so we'll see where the next one goes, and it's been a relationship that's been really good, one that I hope continues.
You did talk like quite a bit against what are you solving?
Oh, yes.
Eat, Pray, Love.
Yes.
all
I
those-
had a lot of things I didn't want it to be. Like, I didn't want it to be Eat, Pray, Love. I didn't want it to be, here I am, solo woman, going to, solve a broken heart. Or I am going to escape a bad relationship or something like that. Because that's a way that a lot of solo women travel's been packaged. And I was like, it's not that, and I really don't want it to be that. And so it could have very easily been packaged that way, and I'm really glad that it didn't.
Those have been very successful.
No, I'm
Yeah.
so you really had to stand your ground and
Yeah.
say that you really want it to be different.
Yeah.
Yeah, spoiler alert, no love interests in the book at all.
No.
I'm not quite sure how to phrase the question, but if there is a parallel process, could you say a little bit about the element of surprise at the beginning of your journey as a solo camper, and then in the beginning of writing this novel, which is, I bought the book already because it's already captured me, so.
Oh, thank you.
It's so nice to, if you could say something about your surprise or your joy or
Yeah.
your sense of beauty, or like, how did I ever think that at the beginning?
Yeah.
And then this is where I am right now.
There's one of the jokes that I sort of make as, especially, there's a spot in Ontario where I end up on a major detour, and like, I planned things very, like, I like a plan. I like reservations, I like to know where I'm going, how I'm going to go. And that day really blew all of those plans just to pieces, which was fine because I ended up on an old logging road, which unfortunately I think cracked the scam. But there was a lot of beautiful things on that road. But the surprise of the book really did, because when I went, I had all of the data for the family. Like I had all of this already figured out. Like I knew names, I knew dates, I knew places where people were. But what I didn't know was what it would feel like to stand in those places where they were. Because Nova Scotia is funky and it is cool. Because the Bay of Fundy's tides are the strongest tides in the world. And so that peninsula moves twice a day. And so what was that like? This unstable land. How did that create the people that we became? I had no idea. Like what does this place look like? What does it feel like? That was the true pursuit of it. What does a group of people do after such an atrocity has happened and they're still left behind? What do you do? And what does that landscape feel like? They went down to Yarmouth, which is on the southernmost tip. And one of the things that I learned that was most interesting, a couple years before I had been to Quebec City. Anybody been to Quebec City? We had gone out to Grosse Ile, which was an island. It's an island in the St. Lawrence. It was the quarantine station for the port of Quebec. And its only purpose was to prevent illness from getting back into Montreal. They had a cholera outbreak in 1832. They wanted to make sure that never happened again. In a normal year, they might see 30,000 people coming through this quarantine station. During the Irish Great Famine in 1848, they saw 100,000 people in a 3-month period. Most of them were Irish. Most of them were very sick. So when they talk about Grosse Ile, they don't talk about how many people died on the island. They talk about how many people are buried on the island. Most of them are Irish. There's a couple of mass graves. And so I was with an Irish studies group, and so they took us on this tour, and we walked up the hill, and you can see it. It's like a football field long, and the landscape, it looks like this, and it's got crosses on the kind of the hill part. And I'm walking up there, and I'm thinking, okay, so I've never seen a mass grave before. Clearly, people are buried in the mounded parts. Our tour guide told us that everybody who died on the island was given their own coffin. They were given their own funeral. They were treated with respect. But then I learned that they're actually buried in the troughs because the coffins collapsed. And I was like, oh, okay. So I learned something about how landscapes and cemeteries worked. And so in Nova Scotia, I learned that the Acadians liked wooden crosses for their graves. They didn't like stones. And so where a lot of my ancestors are buried, we have no idea because those markers are gone. But you can see this. And I was like, oh, there they are. There they are. And there is no way I would have known that unless I was standing there. And so whether it's solo women getting on the road to see something that they've never seen before, there is great value in standing in a place and just, what do you see and what's making your scalp tingle? Because you're never going to know that until you stand someplace. That's a great question.
Thank you.
Other questions?
How often do you have to go to a place before you feel like you kind of get it?
Depends on the place. There were places along the road that surprised me in, like I love thunderstorms. I love cemeteries, but I don't generally have emotional reactions to them. Usually they're just, ooh, I can see when a language shifted from, French to English, or one of my favorites is in Center City, the Swedish cemeteries. You can see when the first language switched from Swedish to English. All that stuff. Like that's historical work that you're not going to get any other way. I don't even though I've got ancestors in there, I don't necessarily feel anything in them. But there was one on Prince Edward Island where, drowned at sea, lost at sea, was in this very small cemetery, and I could just feel this grief. I've never felt that before or since. And so, I don't know, sometimes it's a combination of angle of sunlight and wind and, I don't know, places are fun. You never know which ones are gonna get you when they do.
Is there fun could be the next. I don't know why I'm so obsessed with names.
I like where your head's at. Yeah, places are fun.
Other questions?
Yeah.
There's how do you manage, having access to, cause I imagine you still have a phone,
Yeah.
and then how do you manage the use of the phone versus the altered state that comes with being by yourself, soloing, that used to be locked in up until the early 2000s? And so how do you do that, and then do you have any funny stories about the places you'll travel within your own mind when you're your own company for a number of days?
When I took this trip, it was in 2014, and so I didn't have a phone in Canada. And so I was completely disconnected from pretty much everything. I have become the person who does not go anywhere in her house without her phone in her pocket. Simply because, I don't know, 20 years ago, I hurt my back. I was downstairs, hurt my back, my phone was upstairs, and I had no way to call anybody for help. And so, you know, I just carried my phone around, I like screaming up calling myself up the banister to get my phone. And so I'm like, all right, so we're just gonna carry the phone. And so that's sort of been a safety mechanism. Not always on it, but I generally always have it. But then where it gets tricky, like then the internet goes out in a campground and you're like, oh, storm's coming. So then, you go old school and you've got a weather radio and trust your gut. I was up in Bemidji a couple of weeks ago when the derecho went through. I was with my niece, which camping with the kids in dangerous times, one wants to bring them back in the condition in which they were picked up. But we walked out, I had a reading up there, we walked out into a wall of humidity that had not been there before. And we both looked at each other's 15 and we're like, yeah, no. So we set the timer on her watch and we're like, how fast can we hitch this camp? And we did it in 14 minutes and 40 seconds, which we're very proud of. But my grandparents' place is south of Bemidji, so that's where we headed. They had a basement. And we were heading out and I was like, are we overreacting? And the next morning, the reports came in, we had not overreacted. Lake Bemidji State Park got really badly hit. And so, part of those stories is like, listen to your gut. And part of what's in this book too is remembering or being reminded of what our bodies know about how to be in the world. And so listening to our guts, listening to, if you feel something in a particular place, like what might have triggered that. There's, a lot of animals still left in us. And sometimes it's useful just to remember we are a part of the natural world and we are giving to it as much as it's, giving to us. And that's a story in itself too.
Probably have time for one last question.
One last question?
This might be too personal or too morbid, so
Yep.
Good.
feel free to flag
I
it.
love the way this is ending. Yeah.
As it is the last question, I thought you talk about kind of the energy and magic
Yeah.
in cemeteries, right?
Yeah.
Do you plan on being cremated or buried, and why?
I feel like you two would like to know this information.
We talk a lot.
We do like to talk about it. I have no real particular feelings about it. So I probably cremation and buried with my mother. Fantastic. So something environmentally sound, yes.
We're on it.
So, but some ashes scattered at my grandparents' place.
We talked that the headstones are no longer the only like genealogy tool.
Right, yeah, it's true. Yeah, so gravestones don't hold the same sort of historical weight that they did. Although I still find it very interesting.
Yeah, you can't do a rubbing of an internet site.
No, it's so true. My favorite epitaph though was in Ireland, in Westport, Ireland, and it was an epitaph of the demon Duchess. And I was like, I would like to know her. She sounds interesting. But thank you all for coming. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I hope you have a wonderful evening.